Nothing wrong holding up the wall, man. Are they gonna stand behind us or they gonna say? Okay. Okay, good deal. Okay. I want to thank everybody for coming today. Quite simply, Georgia is facing a healthcare crisis, and the Republicans will not act to help Georgia's families. The picture is bleak, and it is widely held that Georgia's healthcare system is failing. It would only get worse with the expiration of the federal ACA subsidies. Because of new federal laws and our state inaction over the next year, almost 500,000 Georgians could lose health care. Over the next decade, we could lose over 33,000 jobs and billions lost in healthcare revenue and additional billions in uncompensated care. Yet Georgia Republicans refuse to act. In fact, they march blindly and willingly off of this cliff. But the numbers do not tell the personal story that so many of our Georgia families are actually facing. Many Georgians will see their insurance premiums double or even triple. When we talk about job loss, that means people's ability to take care of their families is lost. This is not about politics to these people, it is about survival. You know, when people go to the polls and they elect us to try to help solve their problems. When people of this state voted for President Trump and Republicans, they were trusting that they would address issues impacting their families and especially the health care affordability crisis. Yet the president, instead of addressing the affordability crisis, says that the use of the term is actually a con job. You see, the Republicans, to them, affordability is simply a political buzzword. But to Democrats, we understand that is a term that properly encompasses folks' concern about rising healthcare costs, education costs, and even housing costs. Affordability is not a con job. The con job is the one that's been laid on the people of Georgia by the Republicans that they would promise to do something about these issues. Not only do Republicans refuse to act, they actively ignore legislation that will bring solutions to these problems. Concerning this health care crisis, Democrats led by former Senator Jason Esteves introduced SB 192 because this caucus realized the very possibility that President Trump and Congress, in the name of politics, would refuse to help people and allow the subsidies to expire. Senator Esteves, along with this caucus, is providing solutions to help the people of the state. And so SB 192 was one of those solutions. Make no mistake, over the next few months, in these hallways and around this state, we're going to be laser focused on showing the people of this state which part is about finding solutions and which part is about politics. And one of the leaders of our state who will help us find solutions, as he did with the SB 192, is Senator Jason Esteves. And with that, I'll give it to Senator Jason Esteves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leader, and thank you to the Gregories, who I'll introduce in a second, for being here this morning. And to my former colleagues in the state Senate, thank you for continuing to fight to protect and expand access to health care in this state. My name is Jason Esteves, and I am proud to be working across this state to change leadership because Georgians deserve better than the leadership that we are seeing here today. As a former educator, as someone who's on the Atlanta Public Schools Board of Education, as a former state senator, but more importantly, as the husband of a wife who's a nurse practitioner and owns an urgent care in Metro Atlanta, I've seen the impacts of this failure in leadership firsthand. I've seen what happens when Republicans refuse to act on expanding access to health care and what that means for families across this state. And now in just a few weeks, millions of Georgians are on the verge of either losing access to the health insurance that they need or seeing their premiums skyrocket, premiums that were already unaffordable. Why is that? Because Donald Trump and his cheerleaders have failed to act and extend the subsidies that so many people rely on. Over 1.5 million Georgians benefit from those subsidies today, and they are at risk of losing it because of the failure of Republicans to act. So let's talk about what that exactly means. That means that parents who are going to be unable to get health insurance, even though they're working 2 to 3 jobs each just to stay afloat. It means families are forced to choose between life-saving medical care and putting food on the table or roof over their head. In a state where 15 to 20% of Georgians have billions of dollars in medical debt already, folks can't afford to lose their health insurance. Not only that, small business owners like my wife and I are going to be unable to pay for their employees' health insurance. We knew that this crisis would happen long before today. That's why I authored SB 192, the Georgia Health Insurance Affordability and Consumer Protection Act. This legislation would fill in the gaps in coverage when federal benefits expire at the end of the month. It ensures that we protect Georgians' health care in the face of the chaos coming out of Washington, D.C. My colleagues and I brought this necessary legislation to the Senate floor, but Republicans like Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and others refused to pass it. Brian Kemp refused to show leadership and get his allies on board with protecting health care. And now, as health insurance is being ripped away from millions of Georgians, the governor and his allies are still sitting on their hands. Burt Jones, Brad Raffensperger, and Chris Carr have even cheered on this destruction coming out of Trump's White House and Republicans in Congress. So let me be clear. We are in crisis. And in times of crisis, we run towards that fight. And because we are in crisis, we're going to step up when we are in leadership. We're going to do what we should have done over a decade ago and expand access to Medicaid. But we won't stop there. We're also going to lower the cost of private health insurance and make that more affordable by lowering the health insurance premiums and building healthcare hubs throughout this state. We'll make sure to make it easier for Georgians to get the care they need, not harder. You can count on me, you can count on Senate Democrats to use every tool in our toolbox to help the people of this state get the services that they need. And there's no excuse for Republicans' failures. And it's time to act now. So we are calling on Brian Kemp and state Republican leaders to protect health care now, pass SB 192 next session, and use the state's resources, over $14.9 billion sitting in a bank account, to ensure that Georgians aren't left out in the cold. We want to make sure that every Georgian who is looking at December 31st with fear and worry to know that Senate Democrats stand with you, that we stand with you, and that I stand with you. And here's my commitment to you. I will always put your health first. It's what I've done my entire career, and it's what I'll continue to do as a leader in this state. No matter what attacks Trump and Republicans throw our way, we'll fight for you. Now I'd like to introduce Kiana and Randy Gregory and their mother, Marilyn. Marilyn and Randy Gregory will be speaking to discuss how their families are being impacted by the lack of leadership Republicans have shown and by the expiring healthcare subsidies in the state.
Hi, thank you for being here today. My name is Randy Gregory, and I'm here because what's happening with healthcare right now is personal, not just for me, but for so many people in our state. Several months ago, I lost my job, and let me tell you, nothing prepares you for how fast life can change. One day I had employer insurance, and the next I was suddenly relying on Medicaid just to stay covered. I'm truly grateful it was there because it kept me from going completely uninsured while I tried to get back on my feet and started freelancing. Oh, thank you. However, trying to figure out which doctors take my plan, waiting forever for approvals, feeling like I'm doing paperwork every day is very exhausting, not to mention demoralizing every time you hear someone say, sorry, we don't take Medicaid. Uh, when you're already stressed, navigating healthcare shouldn't feel like another full-time job. I recently got the notice that the plan I qualify for is jumping to over $150 a month after previously being $0, aka free. I'm making money again, but nowhere near what I earned before. That price increase might not sound huge to some people, but for me and for so many others, trying to stay afloat is the difference between stability and spiraling. It was really scary, and I know I'm not the only person who was thinking, how are we going to do this? These subsidies help healthcare within reach for everyday people, and losing them means thousands of us are about to see premiums jump in a way we simply cannot afford. So I'm asking our leaders to please not let this happen. Don't let people be priced out of something as basic and essential as healthcare. Lower the cost, fix the system so it actually works when we need it, make it so that getting care doesn't feel like fighting through obstacles every step of the way. We deserve healthcare that is affordable and accessible. We deserve a system that helps people stay healthy instead of getting pushed deeper into stress and debt. And we just simply deserve better. And that is why I'm so happy to be supporting former Senator Jason Esteves in his run for governor. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me this moment to speak. My name is Marilyn Gregory. I'm 61 years old, and I work hard. And like so many Americans, I live on a modest income. I've been planning for my future and working towards purchasing a home next year, and that's what kept me focused and hopeful and determined. But hope shook just a little bit when I opened that letter, and it said that my insurance premium was going from $86 a month to $522 a month. My heart skipped a beat, y'all, because let's be honest, no matter how hard you budget, no matter how careful you are, there's just no room for a $436 increase, not with rent, utilities, groceries, and certainly not with a new mortgage on the horizon. And the weight of it isn't just financial, it's medical. I have appointments I've waited months for a neurologist and a rheumatologist next year. And changing insurances could mean new doctors, new referrals, and starting the whole process over again. That means more time waiting for answers, more time living with uncertainty about what's going on with my health. Time matters, especially when it comes to our health. And I know I'm not alone. There are thousands, millions of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, doing everything right, and still being asked to choose between their health and their stability. I spoke to another Georgian who's 60 years old who had to have emergency surgery this year. Her insurance is going, she makes $45,000 a year. Her insurance is going from $286 a month to over $700 a month. No one should have to choose between paying for insurance and keeping a roof over their head. No one should have to choose between seeing a specialist and buying insurance. And that's why I'm here today to say I support former Senator Jason Esteves in his run for governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
What do you expect or hope will change this next year as the legislative session gets underway when it comes to this bill? Do you talk to your colleagues on the other side of the aisle? Any indication that you may have bipartisan support this go around?
I think what's really happening is there's a hope that the subsidies won't not expire. But it doesn't look like that's going to take place. It looks like they will expire. And so I think at that point in time, a real conversation has to take place. That conversation should have already happened, quite frankly. And this bill particularly just sat there. And anyone who could kind of read the tea leaves over the summer, and also even during a legislative session, could see where we were kind of heading, that these ACA subsidies were most likely going to be allowed to expire. And when we're in our positions to do these things, to actually make decisions for people, that's when we should have came together and said, okay, we have a piece of legislation. It could have been, somebody else could have drafted the legislation, but we have legislation. Let's try to act on this because we see which way the federal government is actually going. And that's the key. When you're actually tied to the federal government in this situation as we are, you have to look at that and say, we've got to make sure the people of Georgia are actually protected. And that's what's going to happen. So we're going to continue to push this particular issue. If the subsidies are allowed to expire, this bill is going to be still pending, as we know. Another member of our caucus will pick that bill up and really fight for it. And at that point in time, we know we have to have bipartisan support. We can't pass anything without Republican help, quite frankly. So we know that has to take place. That's already a given. The question is, are they going to be willing to actually come to the table and say, we're going to do right for Georgia's families, or we're going to continue to just play politics? Go ahead.
Can I add something really quickly? Because I think it's important to note that the governor has touted the fact that 1.6 million Georgians are now insured because of his health policies. 1.5 million of those 1.6 are insured under Georgia Access, which is the Affordable Care Act. So with these expiring health subsidies, what that's going to mean is that close to 1 million people are going to find their premiums skyrocket, and the Kaiser Family Foundation believes that more than half of those folks are going to get dropped from coverage because they won't be able to afford it. So under Republican leadership, under this governor, we're going to go from having 1.6 million Georgians insured through access to pathways to coverage and through Georgia Access, and we're going to go to maybe having less or around 500,000 Georgians insured. That's close to 2 million Georgians being uninsured because of the failures, not only of what's happening in Washington, D.C., but the fact that Georgia Republicans are sitting on their hands with something, as the leader said, should have been discussed and acted on a long time ago. There's no reason that we could not have acted on this legislation this year, but they don't want to do it because they don't want to embarrass Republicans in Washington, and as a result, Georgians in this state are going to be suffering. We need leadership to step up and do something about it now.
Do you see the state's surplus as the way to fund these goals? And if not, what else? And if so, how do you force Republicans to use the surplus?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that would be one of the ways we could find funding for this. When I think Senator Esteves talked about $14 billion in surplus, and we're talking about, you've heard the personal stories here. So many families are going to be suffering through this. We have to try to find an avenue to make sure we bridge this gap that's going to exist. And this is one of those issues that is obvious. There's no doubt what is going to happen if these subsidies are allowed to expire. Everyone agrees on that. There's no doubt about that. There's a consensus with that. Therefore, the only reason not to actually pursue this bill or similar legislation would be just politics. And as former Senator Esteves says, it's just to protect those up in Washington. That's the only other reason. Sometimes you can have legislation where you say, well, maybe this will happen or maybe that will happen. In this particular situation, no one really doubts exactly what will take place. You just heard from families talking about their premiums have gone up. We know that is exactly what's going to take place. When you have that information, you have to act. And a refusal to act is basically just paying partisan politics. You want to say anything?
No.
Yes, sir.
So, two questions actually. So, I believe open enrollment closed yesterday. So, even if you pass this bill, wouldn't a lot of people still, before the adjustments could be made, still be off of insurance? That's A. And B, has even one Republican said to you behind the scenes, I would support this?
Do you want to talk about behind the scenes when you were presenting the bill?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the answer to both of your questions, one, the governor can still act using executive action to make sure that that we get people covered under plans that are more affordable. And to your point, price increases have already been filed with departments all across the country. So there's a lot of support that would be needed, but Georgia has the tools that it needs to make sure, especially those who are covered through Georgia Access, to make sure that those insurance premiums are subsidized. It just takes the governor and legislative leaders stepping up to the plate and making sure that Georgians get covered. Behind the scenes, Republicans know that health care is in crisis in this state. They know that we should have expanded Medicaid over a decade ago. They know that Georgia Access needs a lot more support. They also know that Pathways to Coverage has been a complete failure by spending $100 million on a plan that covers less than 10,000 people in this state. And they also know that we have to do something about all of those things. So what we need are leaders that are going to step up and actually get something done by putting Georgians first and ignoring and not getting distracted by what's happening in Washington, D.C.
Has a fiscal note been prepared for this bill?
That was part of your bill.
Yeah. The fiscal note has not been prepared for this bill, no.
Do you have a reasonable estimate of its cost?
Well, this bill in particular would have started with a pilot program, so it would have been very limited and would have cost under $100 million.
How many would have insured under $100 million?
We didn't do a fiscal note. It was just an estimate. Yeah.
So part of the legislation, and I want to get back to one of your questions too. Number one, when you're asking about the already closing, it's a subsidy, which means you actually can help people even if it actually is closed. That's what the government would actually be doing. Then secondly, as far as like behind the scenes, let's say you even talk about in front of the scenes. This bill didn't even get a hearing actually, and that is very important. So not only behind the scenes we not really heard, but also openly it did not even get a hearing. And so also part of this particular legislation, make note, please, part of this legislation was that we would actually look at this legislation from a fiscal standpoint, but it had to get passed first. But I do think the initial estimate about $100 million, which would help as far as being a subsidy is concerned, to actually lower costs. That's going to be the key thing because it's a subsidy. So you're actually helping somebody as far as the premium may go up, but you're actually helping them actually be able to pay that. That's the key thing. So, but I think the key is when a bill like this doesn't even get a meaningful hearing, I think that is extremely key.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the program did not cost, or was not estimated to cost $100 million. It was going to be much less than that. The key about this program across the state, or across the country, there are states that have already implemented direct subsidy programs through the Affordable Care Act, and the goal there is to supplement what's happening with the federal subsidies and provide direct subsidies to citizens of the state. So to give you an example, if the premium was $150, the state would subsidize 100 of those dollars for over the course of the year. That's $1,200, right? So just to give you an idea of how much that would be for each resident, and then when you talk about administrative costs on top of that. So it's much less complicated than, for example, expanding Medicaid and having to deal with that kind of administrative burden.
Any others? All right. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Can we get a photo of everyone that sits up there together, please?
Oh, sure.